Hello everybody and welcome back to the Imagine Crafts channel. This is Nicole and I've got a lovely love card for you today. So if you're looking for some inspiration for Valentine's Day, this card might just be it. So today we're going to look at doing some ink blending using a stencil, and then we'll do a little bit of heat embossing, and then I have a really cool trick to make this nice clear kind of acrylic look inside that love. You're going to really be wowed by that. Okay, so we're going to get started with this stenciling, and we're using a stencil from Alta New called Flowing Drops, and I just have a piece of Nina's Solar White. This is just 80-pound cardstock, and I'm taking some tape to tape it down. Now I have a piece of cardstock that is larger than my stencil, as you can see, and then I also, of course, I'm taping this down on all four sides so that way I get it to sit nice and flush on here. And I have some of these awesome finger daubers. That's what we'll be using to do our blending. And if you didn't know, the VersaColor ink, it will blend. So I've got Neptune and pink, so this is the purple, and obviously pink is pink. And I'm going to start with the pink, because we're going to come back and do some blending in afterwards, but it's easier to get the lighter color down, especially because the purple really likes to flow. So I'm just going to get this color in here, and I'm using kind of a mix of a smush and a push, if you will, as I'm putting this color down. I'm smushing so that way I can get on my stencil line here, and then pushing it around so I get good coverage. Now the pigment ink does dry fast, but not so fast that you can't do good blending with it. So I'm picking areas that I really want to have pink for sure. And then I'm going to come back in with the purple here. And then we'll blend these two together. So you can see, you can get the color on here quite quick. All right, and then I'm going to come down in this corner. It's almost the opposite of what I did previously, because I can see some staining on my stencil from that. Of course, I want to make sure that the stencil is completely clean before I started work on this, so that way I didn't get any bleed through. Now, one other thing that I should say is that the reason why I'm doing this on a larger piece of paper is, like I mentioned, so that the stencil will stay in place very easily, but also so that I can pick what section I want to use for my card later. So, you know, sometimes it gets up underneath and then you're like, oh, I don't like that spot. Well, now I have a whole bunch of places to choose from. All right, so I'm going to pull in the Neptune and get that inked up, and then just fill in the white spots. Now I don't care if see how I got in the pink there? I'm okay with that because that's how I'm going to get that blend, right? So, and then this one, of course, I didn't have it completely filled in pink, so I needed to fill in the rest of it with the purple. All right, so don't be afraid to bleed that over because, of course, like I said, we want to get a blend in here. So I am going to kind of pull some of this purple into the pink so that way I can get that all blended. And then I just have this little section in the corner to finish. I didn't want to go too heavy with the purple because it is such a bold color. It's beautiful though, isn't it? So a little bit kind of non-traditional for Valentine's Day, and because it is a love sentiment, of course you could use this card anytime. You don't have to leave it for just Valentine's Day. Okay, so I have a little bit of my bleed through, and I'm just going to take my pink blender. I'm not even going back into the ink at this point, and then I'm just blending out these edges. You see how I'm softening that up? And that's how you get this to look beautiful and all nice and blended together. All right, and I don't even mind taking the seed now that it's contaminated back into some of these pink areas just to make sure that I get a really nice blend with the purple. So finish up this up here. And with the stencil on it, it doesn't look spectacular yet, right? But as soon as we take that stencil off, you're going to be like, holy moly, that blend is beautiful. And how do I know that? Because when I take it off, I say, oh, that blend is beautiful. Okay. All right, so there we go. Let's see what we've got, shall we? So I want to make sure that when I'm taking this tape off, that I'm pulling away from my work surface, so that way I don't accidentally rip any of the good stuff. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that look just stunning? Okay, so we need this to dry. You can use your heat tool on it, or you can just let it sit and dry for a few minutes, because when we go and do our heat embossing on it, we don't want any of the embossing powder to stick elsewhere, and right now it will because that pigment ink is still wet. So I'm going to cut this down to a finished size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then when I come back, this will be dry enough for us to do our heat embossing. All right, so I have my panel here all dried and cut down to size. And I'm just going to pop it in my stamp positioner. And I'm using a stamp set from scrapbook.com called XOXO, grabbing that little love heart there. And I'm going to be using the Encore gold ink pad. And I'm using the gold ink pad because it is also a pigment ink, but I will be able to see exactly where I have good coverage, and it will also help to fill in any spaces that I might have from my embossing. So of course you hope that you get everything covered really nicely and you get good coverage with your embossing, but sometimes that doesn't happen, so you just need to deal with it. Well, if you add a color underneath it, it's really helpful, because that will kind of help hide any imperfections that you might have. All right, so I've got that on there, and we will throw some gold emboss on here. All right. And you can see that I've got really good coverage, so I shouldn't have to worry about anything showing through. But because it's gold, it won't matter. All right, and I'm going to heat this from the underside, and I find that if I can, heating from the underside gets me more even coverage. So I just grab this underneath here. And the key is to make sure that it doesn't get too close to the paper, of course, because we don't want to burn it. But it ends up giving me much better coverage. I think because what happens is I'm heating the bottom first, it gets melty, and then the top just melts into it. So instead of getting like little extra bubbles and things like that, I get beautiful, beautiful coverage. So when at all possible, heat from the underside and you'll get a better result. Okay, so that is good to go. And of course we've got like some warpage going on here, so when I put this down on my card base, we will get rid of all of that warping. And then I'm going to show you the super secret thing that's going to take this project over the top. So it looks cute enough, right, with the embossing and the stencil and blending. So just let that dry for a second. But we can take this to another level with this really cool acrylic kind of look in here. And I got that by adding some on-point glue. All right, so I have a little piece of sticky sheet here. This is just the Sizzix double-sided sticky sheets, and I'm adding it to the inside here just to keep everything in place. So that way when this paint, or when the glue dries, it can dry flat. All right, so now I have a better flat surface to work with. And I'm just going to take my on point glue and start flooding this whole thing with it. And if it ends up going into the letters, that's fine. Or it can just fill up the whole heart and go around the letters. Either way works. It just depends on how nitpicky you want to be with it. It's really kind of a cool effect if you can get it around the letters instead of over the letters. But sometimes this glue has a little bit of a mind of its own, and it likes to just flood over everything. So what this is really highlighting is that the pigment ink is permanent. So even though I'm adding a water-based liquid over it right now, it's not moving, which is really great, because sometimes if you try this effect with water-based inks, they will start to move and get muddy, and then you don't have a crisp image underneath. But with the VersaColor, we don't have that problem. All right, so it's pretty cool how that whole thing comes together. Now, I do recommend that if you do take this step, that you really set this aside and let it dry for a full 24 hours. Now, it's probably going to be completely dry in about an hour, but I just like to give it that extra time so that way you're not fiddling with it or anything and then ending up getting you know, little waves, or it moves out of the heart or whatever. So I just like to let it sit and then come back to it tomorrow and it will be ready to go. Now these little bubbles here, I would wait about 5 minutes and hit it with my heat gun on low, if at all possible, just to help break up some of those bubbles. And they will end up popping. So you will be all good to go and you have a beautiful crystal clear cover over your little heart here. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's project and that it's inspired you to work on some ink blending with your VersaColor Pigment Inks. I will be back with another video soon, but until then, don't forget to subscribe and check out all the amazing designers here at the Imagine Crafts channel this year. I'll have something fun again for you next time, but until then, happy crafting.